How much of your life is being controlled by events thousands of kilometers away? You're in Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Halifax. You wake up, drive to work, buy groceries, pay your rent or mortgage. But your gas price might be decided in the Persian Gulf. Your grocery bill might be affected by a drought in another continent. And your job might depend on a trade decision made in Washington, not Ottawa. Today, we're breaking down how U.S. trade tensions, Middle East conflicts, and global geopolitical instability are quietly shaping Canada's economy, local businesses, and your everyday life. Stay with me until the end, because the link between war headlines and your wallet is much closer than it looks. Segment 1. Canada, in a risky world. Let's start with one basic truth. Canada is a small, open economy. That means we depend heavily on trade, especially with the United States, and we import a lot of the things we use every day, from fuel and food to electronics and machinery. According to recent Government of Canada and Statistics Canada data, about 75% of Canada's merchandise exports go to the United States, and the US is also our largest source of imports. So when the US gets into trade fights with other countries, or when global conflicts disrupt energy and shipping, Canada feels the shock, even if we're not the ones in the fight. The Bank of Canada has been warning about this in its monetary policy reports and speeches. Global uncertainty, especially around geopolitics and trade, is one of the big risks for growth and inflation. When supply chains are disrupted or energy prices spike, inflation pressure can increase again, even as interest rates try to bring it down. Segment 2. Middle East conflict and your gas bill. Let's talk about gas prices, because that's where most Canadians feel geopolitics first. When conflict escalates in the Middle East, whether it's war, attacks on shipping routes, or tensions involving major oil producers, markets get nervous. Oil traders worry about supply disruptions and future shortages. Even if the actual barrels of oil still flow, fear alone can push global oil prices higher. Canada is an oil-producing country, so you might think that means we're safe. But the price you pay at the pump is still tied to global oil prices, mainly the US benchmark. When global prices jump, Canadian gas prices usually follow. In recent years, whenever there has been flare-ups in the Middle East, Canadians have seen higher gas prices, more expensive transportation and shipping, and eventually, higher prices for goods that need to be moved long distances. Think about it. The truck delivering your groceries to a Loblaws or a Walmart pays more for diesel. The delivery van bringing your Amazon package pays more for fuel. Those extra costs often get passed down to you. So when you hear about attacks on shipping lanes, drone strikes on oil facilities, or new sanctions in the Middle East, there's a good chance your next month's gas and grocery bill will feel it. Segment 3. U.S. trade tensions and Canada's supply chains. Now, let's move to U.S. trade tensions, especially tensions with China and other major economies. In the last several years, the U.S. has imposed tariffs on some imports, restricted certain tech exports, talked more about decoupling from China and friendshoring, moving supply chains to friendly countries like Canada and Mexico on the surface. Friendshoring sounds good for Canada. More factories, more investment, closer supply chains. And in some areas, like electric vehicles, batteries, and critical minerals, Canada is benefiting from U.S. policy and subsidies. But there's another side. Canada is deeply embedded in North American supply chains. Canadian factories often import parts from Asia or Europe, assemble them here, and then export the final product to the U.S. If the U.S. slaps tariffs on Chinese inputs, or if shipping from Asia is disrupted, Canadian businesses that rely on those parts face higher costs and delays. The Bank of Canada and Canadian business groups have repeatedly highlighted supply chain risk as a major issue since the pandemic. Even as global logistics have improved from the worst COVID days, geopolitical tensions, from US-China to conflict zones, keep the system fragile. For Canadian small and medium-sized manufacturers, this can mean paying more for imported components, facing longer wait times, having to find new suppliers quickly, dealing with cash flow problems when orders are delayed. Those added costs don't disappear. They either hurt the profit margins of businesses, or they eventually show up in higher prices for Canadian consumers. Segment 4: Inflation, Groceries, Rent, and Everyday Life. Now let's connect this global chaos directly to your everyday life. Even after inflation started coming down from its peak, the cost of living in Canada is still a major concern. Bank of Canada officials have repeatedly said that while headline inflation has cooled, shelter and food remain stubbornly expensive for many households. Why? Because geopolitics feeds into inflation in multiple ways. Energy costs, conflicts and tensions can push up oil and gas prices, making transportation and heating more expensive. Food costs, higher fuel and fertilizer prices, plus disrupted shipping, raise the cost of getting food from farms to stores. Extreme weather, sometimes worsened by climate change, adds another layer of pressure. Import prices. When trade tensions or sanctions disrupt normal trade flows, Canada sometimes has to source goods from alternative, more expensive suppliers. So when you notice, a carton of eggs that used to be $3 is now much higher. Basic vegetables and fruits costing more, processed foods quietly shrinking in size, a phenomenon people often call shrinkflation. Part of that is companies managing their costs in a world where global risk is higher and more unpredictable. Housing is a bit different, but geopolitics plays a role too. Canada has attracted more international capital and immigration, partly because the country is seen as safe and stable compared to more volatile regions. Long term, that's positive. But in the short term, higher demand for housing, combined with limited supply, pushes prices up. So while rental markets and home prices are influenced by interest rates, local policy, and construction, they're also affected by the idea that Canada is a safe haven in a messy world. Segment 5: Jobs, Wages, and Small Business Stress. Let's talk about jobs and small businesses. The Canadian job market has been resilient, but many economists and bank reports have noted that the economy is slowing under the weight of high interest rates and global uncertainty. Businesses are cautious. They're watching energy prices, input costs, and demand. When global tensions rise, here's what often happens in Canada. Export-oriented industries, like manufacturing, energy, and some services, become nervous about future demand, especially from the US investment decisions get delayed. A company might postpone building a new factory, upgrading equipment, or hiring more staff because the outlook is unclear. Small businesses, which usually don't have big cash reserves, feel squeezed by higher borrowing costs, rising input prices, and slower sales. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce and various business surveys have highlighted concerns about weakening demand. Higher credit costs due to past interest rate hikes, ongoing labor challenges, even as growth cools. For workers, this can mean fewer hours or slower hiring in some sectors, wages that don't keep up with living costs, more people taking on second jobs or gig work to cover bills. You might not see a geopolitics line item on your pay stub, but when your boss says, "We're holding off on raises this year," or "We're not expanding like we planned," global risks are often part of that story. Segment 6: Canada's dependence on the US. Blessing and vulnerability. Now, we can't talk about Canada's economy without talking about the United States. The US is our biggest customer, biggest supplier, and biggest neighbor. That's powerful, but it's also a vulnerability. When the US starts a trade war, changes industrial policy to favor domestic production, or shifts its foreign policy in ways that affect global markets, Canada is automatically involved, even if our government didn't choose that path. For example, steel and aluminum tariffs in the past hit Canadian producers, even though Canada was a close ally. Buy American policies can shut Canadian firms out of some public contracts. Aggressive U.S. moves against certain countries can disrupt supply chains that Canadian companies also rely on. On the positive side, when the U.S. pushes for North American reshoring, bringing production closer to home, Canada can attract investment in areas like automotive, batteries, and clean energy. But we always have to navigate this as the smaller partner. For ordinary Canadians, this dependence shows up in how stable your job is in a factory or service that sells to the U.S., how much you pay for imported goods that move through U.S.-centric supply chains, how safe your pension or investments are when markets react to U.S. political drama. Segment 7. What this means for your wallet and what to watch. Let's bring this down to a personal level. If you live in Canada right now, here's how global instability is likely touching your life. Your gas bills, influenced by Middle East tensions and global energy markets. Your grocery bills, pushed up by higher transport and input costs, plus global supply chain issues. Your rent or mortgage, affected by interest rate policy, which itself responds to global inflation and risk. Your job security and wages, linked to how confident Canadian and U.S. businesses feel about the future. Your small business, if you own one, squeezed between global cost pressures and local customers who are already stretched. Banks, the Bank of Canada, and government officials regularly talk about these risks in economic updates, press conferences, and budget documents. They're watching geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, Europe and Asia-US trade policy and elections, global energy and food prices, the health of supply chains and shipping routes. You don't need to read every speech or report, but if you want to understand where your cost of living is going, it's worth paying attention to. Big changes in oil prices. Major trade disputes involving the U.S. new sanctions or conflicts that affect key commodities. Bank of Canada commentary about global risks. These are the early warning signs for your budget, months before you feel them fully in your daily life. Segment 8. Final thoughts. Calm, not panic. Let's be clear, this is not about panic. Canada is still one of the world's most stable, advanced economies. We have strong institutions, educated workers, and huge natural resources. But stability doesn't mean immunity. In a world of trade tensions, regional wars, and fragmented supply chains, even peaceful and wealthy countries like Canada get hit in the wallet. Every time you hear about tensions in the Middle East, a new trade dispute involving the United States, or rising global sanctions and restrictions, remember, there is almost always a Canadian story behind those headlines. In a gas station, a grocery store, a small business, or someone's job. On this channel, we're going to keep breaking down global geopolitics into simple, clear explanations of how it affects Canada's economy and your everyday life. If you found this helpful, and you want more no-drama, no-nonsense breakdowns of money, power, and politics in the Canadian context, hit subscribe, tap like, and drop a comment. Where are you watching from in Canada, and what price increase has hit you the hardest? Gas, groceries, or rent? Your answer might even shape our next video.